The 1965 Western comedy film Cat Ballou was a sleeper film of that year that took off like crazy at the theaters. The movie stars Jane Fonda and Lee Marvin, and it involves a story about a woman who hires a notorious gunman to protect her father's ranch, and later to avenge his murder, only to find out that the gunman is not what she expected. The supporting cast was Tom Nardini, Michael Callan, Dwayne Hickman, Nat King Cole, and Stubby Kaye. Together, this group performs the theme song of the movie, and they appear throughout the film as kind of a musical Greek chorus. The film was directed by Elliot Silverstein from a screenplay that was done by Walter Newman and Frank Pearson, and that was actually adapted from a novel called The Ballad of Cat Ballou by Roy Chancellor. Anne Margaret was first up for this role that Jane Fonda has as Cat, but she turned it down. Lee Marvin earned just $30,000 for his work in the film, and following his Oscar win, he was earning up to $1 million. Kirk Douglas actually turned down the role of Kid Shalene, and Jack Palance desperately wanted that role, but he was never offered it. Now, initially, Roy Chancellor's work in the novel was a serious Western, and they just switched it to a comedy for the film. Even though everyone on the film knew they were making a pretty good film, no one had any idea that they were actually making a classic. Jane Fonda recalls that she had to admit that she wasn't sure how the film was going to turn out until she saw the final cut and realized then that they had a hit on their hands. She hadn't been around when they were doing a lot of the filming, when Lee Marvin was in the scenes with his horse or where he shoots the side of the barn. She had just seen only her cuts of the film and didn't think too much of it. Lee Marvin was just a larger-than-life character and personality on the set. He had a habit of tipping back the bottle, and it made him kind of an irresistible presence on the set. A lot of the people said that working with Lee Marvin was an incredible experience. Some of them said that they had never met such an outrageous personality. Lee loved to drink, and he became more outrageous the more he drank. It said that he had a story to tell about everything and everybody. He had real definitive theories on acting and a style that was his own. He believed that if a little bit was good, a lot would be much better. As a result of this made each take of a scene bigger and better than the last. According to Dwayne Hickman, Marvin sometimes used alcohol to enhance his performance as the drunken kid. And that's probably an understatement. For instance, the very first scene that Marvin shot was one in which everyone meets the kid for the first time, and he is fallen down drunk. Said that Marvin rehearsed this several times and then went behind the barn and took a shot of vodka to steel himself. People walked past him in front of his dressing room where he had just gotten sick, and everybody asked him, "Are you okay? Are you all right?" And Lee Marvin looked up and said, "Tension, baby, just a little tension." Aside from the grueling pace of the film, the cast, on a whole, had a wonderful time making the film. Lee Marvin, in particular, seemed to just relish his dual role that he had as Kid and Tim Strawn. You see, Lee was playing this whole thing with a kind of bravado that caused the colleagues on the crew to break up laughing on every take. There were many times during the shoot that they were uncertain about the direction that Marvin was actually taking the character of Kid. It was clear that regardless of how the original scene was meant to be played, Lee Marvin had his own ideas. When the producer noticed how Marvin's comedic performance kept the cast and crew in stitches, it convinced him that the actor's instincts were right on. Lee Marvin goes on to essentially reprise his Kid role 4 years later in his portrayal of Ben in Paint Your Wagon in 1969. It's kind of ironic that the critics loved him in this performance, but they basically crucified him in the Paint Your Wagon performance. Now, Lee Marvin doesn't make his entrance as Kid Shelleen until 36 minutes into the film. The film CAT BALLOU only runs for 97 minutes, and Marvin doesn't appear in every scene. So the actor had roughly half an hour's worth of footage to establish two characters, making his performance one of the Oscar-winning roles in the Best Actor category with the shortest amount of screen time. Now let's talk about the classic shot in the film where Lee Marvin is on his horse and they're leaning against the building. This is a direct send-up to the sculpture by Frederick Remington called The End of the Trail. Now, the name James Earl Fraser is also attached to this sculpture, and I'm not sure which person did this, but one of the two is responsible for the End of the Trail sculpture. Now, the film's horse trainer told Elliot Silverstein that the scene where the horse leans against the wall and it crosses its legs could not be shot because horses don't cross their legs. But he told him that it might be possible if he had a few days to work on it. The director then told him that he had an hour to get it figured out. The trainer started working with the horse, feeding him sugar cubes while repeatedly pushing his leg into position, and they were finally able to get the shot. It looks like it was a natural thing. Now, Nat King Cole had a nightly singing engagement in Lake Tahoe at a nightclub there, and he would actually commute daily between Lake Tahoe and the set in order to do both of these projects. Everyone kind of noticed that he was coughing a great deal and that he was actually losing weight like crazy. But most of the people thought that he was just running himself ragged, trying to do too many things, and that he had a grueling schedule. Unbeknownst to him and to them, he was already very sick with lung cancer. He died several months before the film was released. Now, while Lee Marvin's drunken antics kept most of the cast and crew laughing, it didn't make a fan out of Jane Fonda. These two didn't get along as time progressed on the set. You see, Jane Fonda had to play her role straight, and the other people basically got to ham things up. She kind of got offended by this and thought that they were having more fun than she was. She took her role very seriously, too seriously for Marvin, who was always trying to joke with her and make her lighten up. See, Jane Fonda was less than enthusiastic about this movie. She wanted to do more serious work, and playing a straight man to a bunch of crazy characters wasn't her idea of great filmmaking. Marvin's efforts to loosen her up were just met with resistance, and she became extremely annoyed with him. And then the big thing that didn't help their relationship at all was that Lee Marvin kept insulting her French husband while he was actually visiting on the set in Colorado. Lee Marvin was drunk as usual, and he went up to Jane Fonda's husband and told him that he hated the French. But then he added, "But I like you because you're half Russian, even though I hate Russians too." So all of these antics by Lee Marvin caused continual problems with his relationship with Jane Fonda the entire time they were on the set. Modern-day audiences regard Lee Marvin's Oscar win for this comedy with a little bit of puzzlement, especially given the heavy-hitting dramas released that same year, such as Darling, Dr. Zhivago, Ship of Fools. All of these were tough contenders. But at the time, however, Marvin's over-the-top portrayal of two totally opposite brothers was a revelation following a career playing the one-note heavies. You see, he had been given the opportunity to show his lighter side, and the audiences loved that. Now, it seemed that this film was done at such a brisk pace that they never did 2 takes on any of the shots unless the camera broke. It's said that the producers had them working overtime every day, day after day. Until one morning, Lee Marvin actually pulled Jane Fonda aside and told her, "We're the stars of this movie. We need to get control of these producers and not let them walk on us. It's not that they bothered them so much, it's that they ran the crew into the ground." And he basically stated that the crew didn't have the power to do anything, but he and Jane Fonda did. So that was one of the few things in the film that he and Jane Fonda agreed on. And they decided to kind of say no when their producers wanted to keep on working. This is definitely a fun watch and a departure down a different road. Take a look at it if you haven't seen it in a while, or if you've never seen it. I think you'll thoroughly enjoy the movie. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.